The Bud Light reality, it's just a theory or reality. These leftoids, and especially the talking heads, are always trying to make fun of us. So those kooky conservatives always going on about this elitist cabal running the world behind the scenes. What a crazy concept. How ridiculous is it? Really ridiculous, like the whole thing with Alvin Bragg being a controlled button paid for George Soros puppet. Well, that chick falls. The leftoids claim Alvin Bragg isn't being paid by George Soros, he's being paid by an organization that's being funded by George Soros. Noob, a fact check false. Mega Chud, your conspiracy theory has officially been debunked, right? The reality is that people like George Soros, major banks and major investment firms, are actually puppet masters. Investment institutions like BlackRock and Vanguard are wielding their, I guess we could call it, capital influence to change the world and their vision to force their ideology on the masses, using companies like Bud Light, Target, and others as proxies or vessels to target your children. And don't take my word for it, listen to the latest conspiracy theory being confirmed as a simple basic reality by insiders themselves. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright, folks, the headline pretty much speaks for itself now, doesn't it? Anheuser-Busch executive reveals how lefty investment firms pressure companies to go woke governance that has sent profits spiraling at companies like Anheuser-Busch and Target often begins with lefty investment firms pressuring them to push products their way. An ex-top Anheuser-Busch exec said. Here's Anson Frerichs describing the insider dynamic. So how does this actually work? These guys are telling the truth. Jesse, thanks for having me this morning. I mean, here's how it works. It's pretty simple. You just have to follow the money. If you take a look at BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, they managed $20 trillion.
Here's how it works. It's pretty simple. You just have to follow the money. If you take a look at BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, they manage $20 trillion worth of capital. But it's not their own money. This is the money of everyday citizens, firefighters, police officers, doctors, who generally have their money either via 401ks or, in a lot of cases, large pension funds. Large pension funds like the state of California, which manages the largest pension fund in the U.S., and the state of New York, and then European pension funds as well. And a lot of the politicians in those states, in California, for example, they recently have mandated those large pension funds that they divest from things like fossil fuels and oil and gas. And then when Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York, was there, did the same thing. But they also sell BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. If they're going to manage their money, they have to commit to things like ESG, diversity, equity.
Their money either via 401ks or, in a lot of cases, large pension funds like the state of California, which manages the largest pension fund in the U.S., and the state of New York, and then European pension funds as well. And a lot of the politicians in those states, in California for example, they recently have mandated those large pension funds that they divest from things like fossil fuels and oil and gas. And then when Bill de Blasio, mayor of New York, was there, did the same thing, but they also sell BlackRock, State Street. If they're going to manage their money, they have to commit to things like ESG, diversity, equity, inclusion, and adopt firm-wide commitments that they therefore then force onto all the major companies in corporate America. Now that right there is literally verbatim exactly what we've been saying. ESG and DE initiatives are at the core of all of his corporate woke nonsense, driving these companies into the ground. They control the investment capital, they control the trillions of dollars, and where it's going to end up, where it's going to go, and so companies must follow. It's not an issue of guidance as much as it's actual force, blackmail, intimidation, whatever you want to call it. Again, they'll take my word for it. Here's the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, literally saying it himself. It's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted. And that's not just not recruiting, it is development. As Ken said, how do you force change though? I mean, Larry BlackRock has really been the forefront of the ESG movement within corporate governance, and a real leader. And yet, change is so slow. So what is, and Ken as well, how do you force change when it is so incremental and so gradual? How do you do something more radical? Have you thought about that? Has the Board of American Express thought about more radical things we could do to enhance diversity and inclusion? Because it has to be imbued in the culture of a firm. It has to be talked about. It has to be shown. Behaviors across the entire firm in every region have to be similar, and every citizen of the firm has to understand what is acceptable behaviors and what are unacceptable beings. Quotes, you have to force behaviors, and that is exactly what they do. Recently we covered how Bud Light's equality score on that equality something I don't know, I forgot the name index, basically a woke activist social credit score for companies, and how some of these major corporations are essentially obsessing over these like kind of leaderboards, prioritizing that instead of doing the right thing and I don't know making and generating money. What a company is supposed to do, well, that was small peanuts compared to this. That little social credit score was nothing but an activist creation. This is more real. What you're seeing on the screen here are ESG scores or ESG ratings. ESG standing for environmental, social, and governance, and economic corporate ratings. The whole thing has been muddied. Let's take two individual ESG scores, post them next to each other to try to make this point. The first is Tesla Inc. ESG score of 37 out of 100 with a social score of 20 and a governance and economic score of 34, environmental 60, and right below that you have Philip Morris International Inc., a cigarette company, a tobacco company. They make Marlboros, on an environmental score of 87, higher than Tesla, a social score of 84, higher than Tesla, a governance and economic score of 83, much higher than Tesla. So Tesla is trying to electrify our world, move away from our dependence on fossil fuels, trying to make the world a better place, but they have a worse environmental and social score than a tobacco company that's using chemicals and pesticides, polluting the earth and polluting water supplies, not to mention all the fossil fuels that goes into growing the crop in the first place. Then they're selling a product that's not just pure tobacco but has all kinds of additives and disgusting stuff, totally carcinogenic. It's killing people, and they have a higher social score than Tesla. You can't make this stuff up. It's totally political. It's simply a phony virtue score, a social credit score that's used to control these corporations to do their bidding. Do as we say, follow our lead, implement all of our programs, or your ESG score will drop into the ground. And maybe if your score goes too low, all the dollars that we've been injecting into your corporation might just simply dry up. It's hard to tell what the motive is. These investment firms supposedly are there to make money. The companies themselves, obviously you'd expect that they want to continue to show growth and increase profits, but it seems like there's some sort of ulterior motive. There's some outside agenda that takes precedent over profit. In many of these cases, it's almost like a couple of these companies are sacrificial lambs that these leftist investment firms are willing to sacrifice for the greater good of their social movement. I don't know about you guys, but when I hear stuff like forcing behavior, social movements being forced by major corporations, call me a crazy kook, a crazy conservative, conspiracy theorist. A massive red flag immediately pops up in my mind. I don't care what it is, I simply don't trust it. It's all the more reason why a message needs to be sent, not just to Bud Light, and not just to Target, but to the whole corporate sector. Your nonsense woke ideology will not be forced on me.